come once again to discuss things.
Alright everyone, let's get started. Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I am Sid Part 2, joining me today is...
Geek for Fun.
And Steve.
Well, we're here and, we're recording this the first day of 2021, and this is a discussion, a review, a retrospective, VH1's Top 100 of 2020, which is just a crazy fucking year. So we had probably the biggest national trauma or not even national, biggest global trauma since World War II, question mark? That certainly stands out.
It's rough to scale it when 300,000 people died.
That's just here in the country, right? But I'm just trying to think of what has impacted the world so dramatically as COVID, and I'm like, yeah, it's been World War II, right? There's nothing else that's been. Every country in the world had to deal with this.
Oh, my bad. If you count in the global totals, it is 500,000 now.
Yay.
And we are a majority of that. So.
No, it's got to be more than 500,000. I swear it's got to be 2.5 or 3. That doesn't sound right.
Let me find out.
Yeah, that does not sound right, because I know India's been really, really hit.
Wait, here we go. Global COVID. Oh, wait, that's cases, that's deaths. Oh, this is just statewide. God damn it, this is so confusing.
1.83 million.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Damn, 1.83 million.
Okay, that's rough. So yeah, so that's been a big one. There was also a, just locally here in the States, there was a presidential election. There was a presidential impeachment hearing that was this year. I can confirm.
I forgot that was this year.
Yeah, I know. There's a lot that went down this year. And I don't know. I've 2020 is probably the starkest example for me where I've honestly felt a little guilty because, well, the world's been on fire for the last 4 years. Things have been going pretty well for me. All the fuck 2020. I wish it never happened. I can't say that because I had a kid in 2020 and that was pretty awesome. So I don't know. It has been a year.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, because funny thing, Ian, as well. My mum was talking to me about that for New Year's because I've had a pretty shitty 2020, but she felt bad because for her and everything, she got a promotion and she enjoyed working from home a lot more, and she's got more money now and be able to support herself a little bit better and stuff like that. So all of that for her was really good. So but then at the same time, it's the sheer, because normally when that happens, because it's not the first time the world decided that a year has been shitty. 2016 kind of had that vibe to it as well. It's just that this was, like you prefaced the start of this video, such a worldwide trauma that was unrelenting. Every fucking month had something which in a previous year would just define that year for some people, of fucking the death of Kobe Bryant was early on. Mm-hmm. And Kobe Bryant was such a figure for people where if that happened in 1 year, people will be talking about that for just, oh man, can you believe it? And the circumstances of it as well. Again, the kinds of what you think of the person, just the influence. And then 2020 was just filled with that. Like, and the fact that we had a pandemic in it that was so like overwhelming is almost a secondary, because even without the pandemic, 2020 been fucking nuts.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, the election, we've already done a whole video on it, and it's only gotten really worse from when we talked about it. But I'm like, goddamn, I'm literally sitting here watching a president try to undermine and steal an election while in office. I never thought I'd see that. Like, it's not just a matter of Donald Trump's a shitty person. It's like he's being like tacitly supported by Congress and stuff, and I'm like, Jesus fucking Christ, this is like insane. We're gonna get some great political thrillers out of this one. Ah, shit, crazy, man. Shit is crazy. Steve, you were just talking. You got your pandemic check. That's probably like the last little nail in the coffin of 2020 is Mitch McConnell fighting vehemently to deny the average working person $2,000. Such a brave man.
I love how democracy is halted by one old dude from Kentucky every goddamn time. Not gonna lie though, I was actually very amused when people found out that Mitch McConnell had a Venmo, and we just started like sending out requests for $2,000 on his Venmo, so much so that he had to like make his account private.
One way or another, I'm getting that $2,000.
Exactly.
Dude, Mitch McConnell should never feel safe to go out in public. Like, that guy is just such an evil person.
Kick his ass, man. Like, I hate that dude. Ugh.
I know.
He's a disgusting human being.
Well, he's not even a person. He's just a turtle. He's just a turtle that disguised itself as a man. A turtle that really hates people.
I gotta say, from like a sort of narrative perspective, I'm both kind of happy and relieved, but also weirded out by the fact that the Murder Hornet subplot never came back around.
That's gonna be like, that's DLC. I think that got
DLC.
taken out. That got taken out. But it's gonna get added in a future patch in 2021. Because again, they gave us so much free content. It would almost be like, you gotta say something.
That's true.
You gotta say something for this. They really they really went all out.
They really did. I mean, you start with World War III, Australia being on fire, murder hornets, and then suddenly the pandemic storyline just takes over.
Yeah, like the main storyline was kind of bad, but then people really took onto that pandemic game mode, World War Zombies, and we really decided just to focus on that for the rest of it.
I remember early on when the pandemic was going on, it was just kind of weird going through your day-to-day life and noticing bizarre things that you never thought you'd have to worry about. Like, going to the grocery store and noticing the kinds of things that people would buy up a lot of for no reason. Like toilet paper, people are dumb. That makes sense to me that people are just going to buy out all the toilet paper in the world, whatever. But fucking bagels? There was like a good month where I could not find bagels at the grocery store. And popcorn? I couldn't find popcorn for like a month either.
I don't know. That was fascinating. I think it's been interesting because 2020 will prove just the it'll just be the best go-to for the longest time now. Anytime you talk about like, oh, well, communism doesn't work, you want to end up in a breadline? Like, oh, capitalism doesn't work, you want to end up in a breadline? There's not even a fucking line for bread, because there is none, because some asshole bought all of it.
God damn, I wish there was a bread line.
Like, it's just been crazy, man. It's been a crazy fucking year.
It's one of those things where I have a hard time kind of wrapping my mind around all of the things that happened this year, because it's almost easier to kind of segment it off into specific sections where like there's the beginning where everything felt like it was kind of okay. Then there was the start of the pandemic when things got really, really depressing. And then there's like this weird middle dark period before the holidays where I feel like everyone just kind of blacked out. And then the holidays happened. And these are basically just 4 years of your life inside of this 1 year.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that is very true. It's weird to me to think about because, like, you know, before pandemic, pre-March, like, I was... Like, it's crazy. I'm disappointed Matt couldn't make it to this. He said he had some personal thing going on. But, like, Matt and I met up halfway between where he lives in Ohio and where I live in Indiana. And we watched the Sonic the Hedgehog movie together. Like, that was a fun thing we did in February for the when that movie released.
What? This is actually a good side tangent. What was the last movie you guys saw in theaters?
Pretty sure it was Sonic the Hedgehog.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it was Sonic. No, I mean, I went and saw Rise of Skywalker a second time, so it might have been that after, but those two are pretty close together.
When did Rise of Skywalker come out?
December
of 2019. Okay.
Yeah.
I think the last movie I saw in theaters was Ip Man 4, which would have been December of last year. So I haven't seen a movie in a theater in a year.
Which is, like, that's one of the crazy things is the whole theater industry is collapsing. Like, there's no way there's going to be theaters by the end of all this. Like, and that's really disappointing because I know some people are excited, like, oh, good, I can watch it on my time. I've heard, like, people talking about, oh, well, the theater industry hasn't changed its business model and, you know, ever. And I'm like, okay, I mean, fair enough, I guess, but, like, they shouldn't kind of need to, question mark, because you're not necessarily going to the theater for the most convenient experience. You're going to the theater for the theater experience. It's like saying fucking I don't know, live theater hasn't changed its business model. Well, it's not supposed to. It's supposed to just be a fucking it's an artistic, you know, venue.
I think for a lot of people, specifically people that go to the theater often, going to the theater is kind of a coping mechanism, and that's maybe the worst thing that this pandemic did for a lot of people is it kind of destroyed their ability to cope with the world prior to the pandemic. So, like, going to the movie theater would be, okay, I'm having, like, a really shitty day. I'm just going to turn my phone off, or put it on silent, actually, and sit in a movie in a dark room for 2 hours, and it'll make me feel better. And like that's a pretty normal, regular occurrence to just kind of like tune out of your life for a little while and go to the movie theater, or go out to a bar, or like walk around the mall on a Sunday afternoon, or go out to eat on a Friday night. Like all of these like really basic normal things, or even like some people where their best ways to cope with stress is to go to the gym and like have a really intense workout every couple of days. And all of that got shut down. So like not only were you depressed as fuck because you were trapped indoors all the time and millions of people are dying because of a disease that should be very easily preventable if everyone just got paychecks and got to stay home. But then you couldn't even cope because you weren't allowed to do the things that helped you function in the world to begin with. And it's just it's kind of disastrous. Where like I remember I was in quarantine from work 2 separate times, and those 2 weeks being home alone, not being able to see anybody, were the fucking worst.
It's funny, I remember a really, really great TikTok that fucking just summed up this whole thing, where it's like, caption on the top, early March. Yo, dude, they're saying they might send everyone home for 2 weeks. Nah, way. That's just too good to be true. December, and then it's just like the dude fucking sitting in a dark room in front of the TV, and he just looking so goddamn sad. Like, yeah.
I never thought being sent home for 2 weeks would be a bad thing, and now it's like literally the worst thing I can possibly imagine. I used to think I had a pretty good tolerance for being on my own. I used to think very naively that, like, you know, you stuck me in solitary confinement, I probably would not have a terrible time. Nope, that's bullshit. That's absolute bullshit. I hate it so much. I didn't realize I enjoyed people's company anywhere near as much as I apparently do.
How about you, Alfie? What's your thoughts? You've been kind of quiet on the 2020 discussion.
Well, it's one of those things where, like, I feel it's almost like the opposite thing that happened to me, Steve, is like, I finished, I got my law degree in 2020. I finished university, and how I did university, and if people have been following the channel, I've probably kept up with my whole journey at this point, is I commuted to a different city on the train, on like a 5-hour train journey, like every 2 weeks, and I came back to Coventry to hang out with my mum and family and stuff like that. But because of that, and me being me and not exactly having much of a social thing, that was kind of like my main thing with people, is I would come back for this. And when the pandemic hit, I was already like that was like just as I was about to finish. So I had to come back and then do my exams online from at home, which was annoying for law because you need to be able to go and cite sources, which are only in a certain library and that whole shit. But it really, being forced to put on yourself and other things going on, it's one of those things where I just realized, well, damn, I actually do quite like just being able to be on my own and work on projects a lot of the time. Like this has been a good excuse to just do that and to work stuff out in a way where, like, Ian, we were doing DBDC, and if it is it fair to say that if not for the pandemic, we probably wouldn't have got those scripts out as fast as we did.
Yeah, like we wrote, what was it, 70,000 words in the course of 7 weeks, which was really
we wrote a
more
novel.
like 14 days. Yeah, no, that was pretty crazy. And like honestly, if I didn't have Leah to take care of during that, it probably would have been even quicker. There were rarely times where I felt like we needed to stop for sanity's sake. It was more just, sleep's sake that we ended up needing to stop. We could have just finished the entire series in script form if we just kept going.
That's a good point, though, because I'm looking at just my YouTube backlog, and all 8 video essays I did this year, I wrote from April onwards. So it was all products of the pandemic. If the pandemic didn't hit, I probably would not have made anywhere near the number of videos I did.
Oh man, 8 videos. Whew.
Hey,
you need a glass of water?
Video essays take a long ass fucking time, okay?
Okay.
Those things are complicated.
Alright. Fair enough. I'll give you a binky.
You're now like an official binky giver at this point, though, so that like hits like double hard.
It's funny because like Leah doesn't like pacifiers, period. She just chews on them for half sec, spits it out. Like, what is this shit? So like I've got a supply of pacifiers, and there's just a lot of bitching that goes down at my work on a daily basis, just constant bickering and bitchiness. I'm so tempted to just bring those in. When I hear someone bitching, just fucking peg them right in the face.
You heard it here, folks. Part 2, peg them right in the face.
Oh man, so very tempted. Anyway, it's a very productive year in a number of ways. I mean, I spent it's funny you mentioned the DVDC thing when we were writing scripts. Most of the fake covers I made for DVDC as like promotional material. It was something I'd wanted to do for a while, but I was like, I want to do them all as a backlog, and I want to get the numbering order correctly, and I've had to abandon that since. But I'm like, man, I just don't know. I ended up doing that mostly during the pandemic. Like I worked on, I'd spend like a good day working on some of those, just getting every little detail right. And I probably wouldn't have been able to do that without the pandemic, at least not as quickly. So yeah, things got pretty crazy. Just trying to find stuff to do. It's funny because like I've hit days where you just get tired of being home. You just want to go do something, but it's not responsible to go do something, so you have to go find alternative ways. So I remember one night, this was after Leo was born, came home, I was like, I just don't want to eat dinner in front of the TV again tonight. Can we just go pick something up from the drive-thru and just find a parking lot with a pretty view? And so we did that. And that was like the best we could come up with. It has been a year of adjustment. Like I've noticed, and I think that's like also worn on relationships in a different way, because no matter how much you care about someone, no matter how much you love someone, sometimes you just get tired of people. And so like I've noticed with Haley and I, we're not even like fighting, we're just like every little inconvenience in communication of like not being able to hear the other person over like the dryer running or whatever is just exacerbated. And it's just, yeah, because we're always doing stuff together now. There's no opportunity for her to go hang out with her friends or whatever. And so you're just annoyed. You're just tired of people. That when all you have are the people in your household, because it's irresponsible to go do anything else. It's pretty crazy.
Well, I actually, like, again, contrarian here, but like, it's also like the opposite thing as well, right? Is having distance from people, you do really kind of see the people who make the effort, the people who like, all right, so we're not going to see each other unless one of us actively goes online or makes like a time, or especially even online, like if you're busy or stuff, like you have to schedule to meet people and to hang out with friends more and to put an effort in. And you very quickly realize that people who just don't care about you enough to do that. And again, I've had many people actually, especially in like the real life circle, and a couple of online people as well, where without the systems put in place where you are forced to interact or where you would normally go out to do things, they just don't. Your company is just not there anymore. You're that just talking to you isn't enough. But that also on the flip side makes you really appreciate the people who do make the effort to do that. This year is definitely the most I think I've definitely Ian, me and you have been doing this for a couple of years now, but Steve, like I've connected with you this year the most that we've ever done, and I've really enjoyed being able to do that.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, we've become really good friends over this last year, partly because of the pandemic. It's interesting, too, because you bring up this point about having to go through the trouble of trying to talk to somebody. And I think one thing that most people have noticed ever since smartphones became a thing is that your relationships you have with people through digital communication and the relationships you have with people that you talk to face-to-face, there's not necessarily one's better than the other, but they're different, right? Like you're texting with a person versus you talking to that person in real life. It's a different kind of thing. And some people are very content to, like, as long as I get a text from somebody, I'm happy and this is fine. Other people do not give a shit about texting or emails or anything like that. Because the moment they see you in person at some point, everything's fine, all is forgiven. You pick up exactly where you left off. And for me, I just really need continuity with people. And I notice with some people, it's like they will disappear off the face of the earth for what seems like weeks on end. And then they'll show up out of nowhere, and it's like they never left. And I'm like, I don't know how you do this. I actively need to like go out and seek communication and message my friends and talk to them and see how they're doing, because I just like talking. And being put in the situation where you're trapped inside, you can't do it, sort of forces you to create more of those online communications and more of those opportunities to have those talks. Like New Year's Eve the other night, it was Alfie, me, Aaron, Smonkstick, everybody just kind of shooting the shit for 4 hours. And that's fantastic. But would that necessarily have been a thing we would have done if we weren't all trapped inside? Because I probably would have been out at a bar on New Year's Eve.
or the classroom.
Yeah, exactly. But like that, it's interesting how like online communication is detrimental to a lot of things, but it's beneficial for a lot of things too. But it's interesting how much people are willing to sacrifice so that they can keep in touch with you becomes even more apparent when they go through the trouble of trying to do it digitally, whether it's texting you more or DMing you more or interacting with your social media profiles more. One of the other terrible things about this pandemic is how dependent we have all become on streaming services and social media to kind of get through the day, which was always bad, but now it's even worse. But that said, navigating all of that and trying to develop like real connections with people, I think is kind of genuine and kind of nice. I think it is kind of worth having arguments with people and being like, hey, I just kind of wish you would text me more because it shows that we are still good friends.
I got nothing. It's just... See, I notice I'm really bad at specifically what you just talked about. And I think this year has made that more
I feel
evident.
like most of my friends are like that. They're really bad about just texting.
Well, no, I'm really bad at it, and my phone, okay, so this is really fucking stupid. My phone will do this thing where it'll be working properly, perfectly working order, there's no, glitches or weirdness about it. I can go on Twitter and YouTube or whatever. And then, I'll be like, oh, I need to make a call real quick. And I'll call someone, and in the middle of my call, I'll get 6 text messages that have been sent to me that I never received because I hadn't used my phone to call or text anyone in a couple days.
Have you tried getting a new phone?
I mean, I spent $300 on it, man. I really don't want to get a new phone when it's in perfect working order otherwise. So I just need to make more excuses to call and text people, I guess. It's that's a really annoying thing. But even then, especially now with Leah, I have a really hard time responding to anything in a timely manner because I'm generally speaking a forgetful person. I'll get a text or group chat thing on Twitter, for example, and I'll think, oh, I'll respond to that in a sec when I've got a second. And then it's 3 hours later, and I'm just, if I remember, So I'm really bad about that.
I'm noticing that most of the people I talk to are kind of like that, and I think part of it also might just be, depending on what part of adulthood you're on, responding to text messages just seems like the least important thing in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. Alfie's actually really good about responding to messages, which is nice and helpful because I pretty constantly need someone to talk to. And now we have just this constant ongoing group chat with the Teen Titans that just never stops.
It never stops. It truly is a thing. For me, at least, I think, is I'm kind of the opposite of Ian, which is, I think, why he's the best choice to write anything with me, is because, I get, obsessed with things. I am super, rememberative. I the opposite of forgetful, whatever that word would be, is if something is on my mind, that is on my mind for the rest of the day until it is done. And because I have a lot of things that still aren't done yet, you can imagine how much of a mess my head is right now. But it's one of those things where if I get a message from someone or something, and even it's 5 different people, I have to respond to that as quickly as I can because otherwise it's just they're just baggage that I can't be dealing with, which is a problem as well. Because sometimes you want to play it cool. sometimes you want to not come across super oh yeah, but that's just one of the things. I'm very happy that you appreciate that, but it's also something where I think as well, just in terms of as a content creator for me, this year with the growth of the channel and other things has been where I've had the most exposure to running a community, and not just that, but also interacting with other content creators and their communities, and seeing how the pandemic has changed that, because it's gotten better now, but by and large, January and February are always kind of slow months for YouTube. Like they're not that good. So like the start of the year was just usual for people. But then when we started getting into the pandemic, it, in theory, should boost YouTube views because all people are doing is sitting at home watching YouTube. But because how AdSense work is you have to click on the ad to get the money or like purchase something from that thing, because people aren't buying anything, AdSense and like YouTube revenue went plummeting down for a good like 5-month period for people. And like we're a small channel anyway, we don't exactly make that much, but like Smugstick was talking to it and like he was like, yeah, it's bad, and like other people like Masterco as well, like really tough time for YouTubers. And it goes to your point, Steve, of like saying like how dependent we are on streaming services, because YouTube and content creators are kind of the only thing that can possibly compete with things like Netflix or Disney Plus for like attention, because even for the people who's like, Disney does not own us. Like, they own Smugstick because he's got that Disney money, but like they don't own me. So like we can put out whatever content we want. We can have Jenny Olsen trigger 50 million man babies in our comment section, and we can laugh about it because they can't stop us. We can do what the fuck we want. But because we can't, despite being on a level playing field in terms of people watching us, the fact that how they make their money and how they get successful and how they get their funding is completely detached from how YouTube works, means that they are completely overwhelming that space. They have such a direct boot on the neck of that market. It's almost unreal. And I've never seen anything like TV was transformative and took over everything. But like streaming has like really, it's always been big, but now it's like fucking, like you said, it's got a chokehold on people.
The streaming thing legitimately kind of scares me, because I think we've sort of lost sight of what our relationship is to the things we're watching, and it's become less about what you're watching and more just about getting it over with. Like, at some point when you're watching a weekly TV show that comes on at like 8 o'clock every Thursday night, you watch it, you catch it, you enjoy it, you have a week to talk about it, it's whatever, it's fine. It's not like there is some great old heyday of when TV was great or anything, but just arbitrarily, when something is on once a week, it's a little bit more special, it's a little bit more interesting. But now, because of streaming and the way stuff is released, it's almost like we've sort of developed this obligation to consume the content just because it was put out and not even necessarily because we care or because it's good or bad. I mean, how many people do you know that will like stick through and watch every season of a show and then just complain to you about how terrible it is, and you just want to be like, well, why the fuck are you still watching it? Or like, how many channels are people subscribed to where they watch every fucking video and all they do is complain about it? It's gotten to this point where consuming the content is just part of what we do. And when you have nowhere else to go and no one else to be with, and the only hobby you have is watching shit on Netflix or watching shit on YouTube, it sort of just becomes your personality. And so like your new morning routine becomes, okay, if I really focus today and minimize my bathroom breaks, I can get through this entire season of Game of Thrones or something. And it sounds crazy to talk like that, but people are legitimately just kind of doing that. And to their credit, I mean, it's not like they have a lot else to do. My worry is, whenever the world opens back up, whenever we get to this mythical land in the future where there's a vaccine or there's social safety nets or whatever, wherever we get to this point where I can go to a bar and have a drink or go out into a movie and enjoy it in the theater, I am very, very worried about the number of people that are going to be inclined to just stay home and do what they did for the entire pandemic. I was very, very down on this idea when this all started, that people were like, well, 2020 is a wasted year because everything I planned and all my resolutions are canceled now because the world shut down. And I hated that mentality. I hated this idea that, like, okay, just because you're stuck at home, you're going to say this entire year of your existence just doesn't count. Like that's the dumbest, most nihilistic thing I've ever heard anyone say. And millions of fucking people were saying that. And they decided, well, since I can't do anything, since I can't go to the gym, I'm just going to stay home and watch Netflix for 4, 5, 6 months. And I worry that because that decision was so easy, how many more people are inclined to do that regardless of what happens to the rest of the world? It's kind of scary because it gets to this point where Netflix is not slowing down. Disney Plus is clearly not slowing down. The Disney Investors Day presentations where they released all of this content, like, I don't fucking care if it's good. There's too much. Why are we consuming this much? It's completely unreasonable.
Yeah, not only that, the thing I worry about like the post-pandemic world is really related a lot to kids. This year's really gonna fuck with kids for an entire generation. Not just with the idea of missing school and falling behind on classwork, though that's obviously really important, but just like socially. I've heard a lot of people talk about, like, I've heard a lot of interviews with teachers where they're like, I can tell kids are struggling, but I don't have the same kind of tools to help them, because the kid that normally would just not show up and then I could really get that as an indicator, I could go find them and talk to them. Now they just turn off their camera, and that's like so much worse. That's really terrifying. And then you just got I think about like little kids that have regressed. Like I've heard stories about like kids that were starting to be able to fall asleep on their own and socially develop more, and now they've regressed and need to be like rocked to sleep by their parents again. And I don't know, I mean, the fact that like you go out in public and you can't see people's faces doesn't sound like it's the best for like social development and the ability to comprehend facial expressions. Let me ask you this one, guys. Have you caught yourself like watching a show or something and seeing two people be like close together without a mask on and talking and thought like, oh, hey, don't do that?
Fuck yes. Oh my god, I can't tell you how many times I turn something on, I'm like, whoa, should there really be this many people in this scene? This seems unsafe.
No.
Yeah.
It's a terrifying thought. Like, all of us were old enough to remember watching 9/11 on the news, and it basically, I like this meme a lot where it's like, what's wrong with you? I'm like, well, I saw 3,000 people die on live TV when I was 10 years old, and nothing got better afterwards. And that's kind of what kids are going to have to deal with now, where there's a bunch of like 9, 10-year-olds who saw 300,000 people die and nothing's gonna get better.
Yeah. But on your point about the binging of content, no, dude, there's so much. Like, there's stuff I legitimately want to watch, but I'm just like, I'm determined to go through it at my pace because I'm terrified of falling into that trap of just never doing anything else besides watching television. So spoilers for The Mandalorian Season 2. Luke Skywalker shows up at the end and fights some guys in a hallway, I guess. And you know me, I really don't like spoilers, but very quickly I accepted that I was going to be spoiled on The Mandalorian because right now, actually I just finished the other night, I was working my way through Rebels. I didn't want to watch The Mandalorian because I was working my way through Rebels. And just in the middle of the day at work, one of my coworkers comes up to me and is like, Ian, stop watching Rebels, watch Mandalorian right now, otherwise you're going to be spoiled on something amazing. Like, it was so good it made me cry. I'm like, nope, not doing it. Not going to binge the crap out of a television series just to avoid the spoilers on it, because there's no sense of decorum on spoiler conversation anymore since everyone binges the crap out of television.
It's it's kind of scary just thinking about it on those terms, where it's like it's gotten to this point where it's almost like you're expecting everyone to possess a moral imperative to, if you don't binge everything all the time, whether or not you like it, then you're going to be out of the social loop. And me caring about you is me telling you to sit there and watch 16 episodes of a TV show just so you don't get spoiled. Like, not even because you should watch it, but just so you can avoid the spoilers.
You remember that episode of The Simpsons where it's like a flashback to when Homer and Marge were first dating, and they're walking out of Empire Strikes Back, and there's a line of people to go watch Empire Strikes Back. Then Homer just goes, "Oh man, I can't believe Darth Vader was Luke's father," and everyone's like, "Ah!" And I'm like, God, no, that's just like the day-to-day now. It's just, well, the episode aired last night, or the season's been up for a week, so that should be enough time, right? No, that's not enough time.
Well, and I mean, I tweet about this, where like I wake up at 5 a.m., 3 a.m. is when The Mandalorian hits. There's only 2 hours between it releasing and me being awake, and every morning at 5 a.m. I am spoiled on a Mandalorian episode.
That's
like, how is that fucking possible? There's only 1 hour between the episode ending and me getting up.
You gotta stop checking that feed and just go straight to The Mandalorian.
Apparently.
That's amazing. It's just that, like, I mean, I'm not that bad, but yeah, my feed spoiled the Skywalker thing for me. And I'm just like, I mean, would have been nice if we could have just chilled. I mean, like, even if my feed had, fucking YouTube would have, because everyone puts it in their fucking thumbnails. Now there's the fucking Tarkin conversation is back about how good the face changing technology is. I'm just like, Jesus Christ, people. Just presuppose, like, it's funny because Star Wars fans are particularly aware of this. Like, I've had multiple conversations with different Star Wars fans about, like, oh, how do you preserve the Luke and Vader father reveal? And I'm just like, well, apparently not like this. You guys should be particularly good at this by now, and you're just not. And I'm fucking pissed.
I remember when it was announced that The Boys was just going to release its second season, like, week to week, and people fucking rioted.
Yeah, people review bombed the show.
Like, that's...
They went to Amazon, they review bombed the entire show simply because they were releasing it week to week.
It's the dumbest fucking thing I've ever heard, but at the same time, I'm not surprised, because, like, apparently all we want to do is stay inside and consume television. And now that there's a pandemic and you can't go outside, we've just intensified the need to sit at home and consume television. And, like, I'm not even saying that, like, you can't binge a show. Binging shows are fun. I enjoy it. It's a good time. But, like, it's literally become our entire life. And that's terrifying, and it's horrible. And I don't comprehend the people that will just stay in bed watching TV all day.
I mean, it's almost like the you remember Idiocracy? Where he goes to that one dude's house and he's got like a fucking lazy boy with a toilet built into it, and he just sits, and it's got like a fridge built in on one side and a microwave on the other side of the armrest, and he just sits in his chair all day and watches television, and the fucking television is just like this constant, is like a gigantic screen, takes up a whole wall, and the main screen is the show or movie or whatever that he's watching, and then just surrounding it are a bunch of ads instead of black border space. And I'm really waiting for that fucking lazy boy to come out, man.
It's only a matter of fucking time.
We're like
at this
so
point.
close to it by now, dude. I swear.
Well, I mean, there's just like little things about how television and streaming kind of make your decisions for you about what to watch. Like this is a little thing. Like
autoplay function is a nightmare.
Autoplaying the next episode, skipping the credits to autoplay the next episode, stuff like that. Or like immediately starting the preview if you just click on a thing.
Oh god, I hate that.
That's obnoxious. And then Netflix will specifically, if you click on a movie just to read the description, it'll play the movie from the start and fade the description out as you were trying to read it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, you don't even have a
Fucking
choice.
annoying.
You just have to start watching things.
Remember The Onion? They did that video about like Netflix is offering infinite scrolling for $2.99 a month, and I'm like,
I remember. I put that ad in my Netflix binge watching video that I did.
oh, that's right. Yeah, no, I fucking love that, and like it's hilarious, but it's you couldn't even do that anymore because now you can't just infinitely scroll. They just start the fucking thing. It's like a fucking gotcha moment, you know? It's horrible.
I totally get the impulse to like want to come home after a miserable day and just watch things, and I appreciate certain weekends where I don't do anything and I just kind of watch things. My hesitation in all of this is just, at what point did watching TV become a second job? Because it used to be you go to work, you come home and watch TV to take your mind off work, and then start the cycle over again, which is not ideal, but that's kind of how it was. And now it's you go to work, and then you come home and you finish binging, and that's your second job. And then you decide to watch TV to relax after you finished your obligatory binging of something. Like, that's fucked up.
Yeah, no
It's pretty
lie.
fucked up. It's one of those things where you, the entire like, I think that's a thing as well. Just like the social, I don't know what's the word for it.
Pressure.
No, like domino effect of that, right? Where what is being, and it's like a self-repeating domino, where like there's an endless kind of Ouroboros, where it like eats its own tail. Where we've got, let's use the Star Wars example. We've got The Mandalorian, is a show that they release on Disney Plus on the streaming service. It's for people to watch and speculate about week to week. This means that every single Star Wars YouTube channel will be having a Mandalorian review drop / speculation / depending on the channel, it'll be like 5 videos for the one episode and stuff like that. And that's not even, yeah, like it is like, and then like speculation or ranting about it or what have you.
Get on that Dragon Ball Super manga level and make 10 videos off of like a fucking preview panel.
Yeah, exactly, right, exactly. I could have used Dragon Ball Super as well, but I think the Star Wars one's another thing, because then the people talking about that in fandom on Twitter or social media, on Facebook, wherever, or even just again in general, but the pandemic has really made it like social fandom things, is you'll have people arguing about that content for that week, and that will be the only thing that is talked about in relation to that. And if you're not talking about it, you are out of the loop, because eventually you're, and the Luke Skywalker thing is a good example as well. I wanted to wait at least like a week before I started talking about it, but at that point, because everyone else was talking about it, and because what tends to happen is when people talk about it, they have their takes. And me being me, especially with fucking Star Wars, it's one of those things where like I feel the urge to Febreze the air and then post a take about that, to talk about why no, stop being stupid, people. Stop being angry, and it's too foolish by being angry and foolish myself. That's truly a conundrum. But like that goes in its own route, because then fandom's talking about all of that, and then Disney sees that, oh, fandom's talking about Star Wars so much, let's make 1 billion other Star Wars shows.
Oh, God.
Yeah. So now, Mandalorian is one show, and it's caused this. When there's fucking like 15 of these things, it's gonna be, I can't, it'll be implode. Either Star Wars YouTube is gonna make fucking bank, or they're gonna completely implode because there's just too much. No one could keep up with it. Like, even the people who just instantly put out a video just cannot keep up with the sheer amount of things they have to do.
I mean, it reminds me, and forgive me for bringing up bad memories, Steve, but like it reminds me of like Geekvolution, when like at first it was the fucking the Arrow episode reviews. And then, like, the fucking Flash started, and then what came after Flash? Was
Legends of Tomorrow.
Legends of Tomorrow, and then there's Black Lightning and
Gotham, Black
yeah,
Lightning.
Yeah, so they tried to keep up and do like episode reviews for every single thing, and then they ended up doing the stupidest fucking YouTube format I've ever seen, which is one like 8-hour video where it was just talking about each thing one after the other, posting that, and then cutting that up and posting it as individual videos. The stupidest fucking thing I've ever seen. And it's funny because a lot of those DC shows, they've still gone. I mean, like, I know Supergirl's over or ending soon.
Supergirl got
Yeah, it's gonna have its last season.
Mhm.
Yeah, Flash is still going. Legends is still going, though I'm not sure for how long because Brandon Routh got kicked off that show, and I'm presuming it's going to end soon.
Brendan Roth got kicked off of it?
Yeah, they took it. They wrote his character out, and then he did an interview a few weeks later, after he got written out, and he says it wasn't his decision to get off the show.
Oh, man. That's controversial. Okay.
Brandon Routh's a super nice guy, though, so he makes it sound sweet. But he literally says, I filmed my last episode of The Legends tomorrow, which was not my decision.
Damn.
Yeah.
Maybe everyone else is really shitty and they just can't take his niceness.
So the Mandalorian is the first live-action Star Wars TV show. It had 2 seasons, and at the end of the 2nd season, it spawned 7 spin-offs at the exact same time. Like, on what planet is that a proportionate response to 2 mildly good, not even great seasons of television?
From
It's
what
that
I
content.
hear, yeah, and like it's not like even the spin-offs of Mandalorian are the only things they're doing Star Wars, because they're doing fucking The Bad Batch, which is the new spin-off to Clone Wars, which is
That's true. I mean, I wasn't counting that. It's 7 shows. It's 7 live-action shows that come out after the Mandalorian success, not even counting the 2 animated shows that they were rolling out.
because they're doing Bad Batch. What else are they doing?
Visions.
Visions. What's
Which
Visions?
is that anthology anime thing, which actually sounds pretty exciting, which I kind of want to watch.
Okay.
But yeah, so the Book of Boba Fett is just a straight up spin-off. Ahsoka is a straight up spin-off. Rangers of the New Republic is a straight up spin-off, and apparently Ahsoka and Rangers and Mandalorian are all going to happen at the same time, and then Boba Fett's going to happen at the same time. And then Kenobi and the Rogue One show and the Sith show and the Lando show, and it's a nightmare.
That is a lot of things. That is a large number of things.
It's just like any one of these would have been fine. You know, like Mandalorian Season 2 I was not hyped on per se, but you ended that episode with Luke Skywalker and then a teaser for the Book of Boba Fett, and then suddenly next summer you had the Book of Boba Fett. Okay, that's neat. That's legit. I would have been okay with that. But no, you had to spin it off into 7 different shows. And people just eat that shit up. And like, I'm not saying don't enjoy your Star Wars, but and this has been my problem with the whole Star Wars conversation. I don't give a single fuck about whether or not Luke Skywalker showing up at the end of Mandalorian is consistent with The Last Jedi or any other Star Wars movie. That's a boring conversation that you are entirely entitled to have, but that's not the problem. The problem is, what do we as an audience want from our Star Wars content? Because the way we are consuming it, and the things we are asking of it, and the things that it is giving us, seem really, really unhealthy for us. I don't give a shit that Luke Skywalker showed up at the end of Mandalorian. I'm mildly concerned that the response to the Darth Vader scene in Rogue One was to mimic that for Luke Skywalker at the end of Mandalorian, and then the response to the sequel trilogy being so mixed resulted in Disney being really, really slow burn on all the rest of their Star Wars products until The Mandalorian got a modicum of success, and they decided that warranted 7 spin-offs at the same time. Like, that's the concern. I don't give a shit if any of these shows are good. They can be great for all I care. They can all be fucking True Detective, and I'd watch all of them. But this is excessive, and it's dangerous.
So anyway, 2020.
Yeah. I mean, again, that's funny as well, because that's like the trail end of 2020, but I do think this is a direct response to 2020. Like, this would not have happened, I feel like, if
I'm sorry, Alfie. In the midst of all this conversation, I just got a Disney Plus notification on my phone. The time to stream Soul is now.
There you go. They're watching us. They're keeping you on the fucking money. That's for sure.
Sorry.
No, it's fine because like it is one of those things where like the sheer amount of content and stuff is because and it's kind of like the thing that happened. Another weird fucking thing that happened in 2020 is the fucking Snyder Cut.
Oh my god.
Fucking that is a thing that is happening now, and that got all that shit happened. And again, that feels like a lifetime ago as well. We're living with that, but like. And I think a lot of the result to do with this is just because how production companies have had to change. Like, the reason the Snyder Cut happened is just because WB needed to keep people in work. To keep, like, VFX artists and, like, people who do costume design and all of these things who need to be trained and work on commission. If they do not have projects, they do not get to feed their families. So they, like, okay, what do we have? Fuck it, there's like this half-finished kind of grainy fucking film. All right, we'll work on this one because we don't need to use that many extras and shit like that, and we can just use a lot of VFX. Like it keeps people employed. And I think the same thing with Mandalorian is because so much of that happens in a stage with those frankly amazing technology that they use for like the backgrounds where like they just put it on these big video game rendered screens and just render it in real time because you can do that indoors and you can line up shots where you can keep people genuinely pretty separated. You can film shows like that, you can film Star Wars things like that pretty easily even in pandemic conditions. And I think that's why they've jumped on it so hard with such the quantity is, again, it's kind of a partial parcel as this is the safest option they have at a time where they're all fucking failing and their golden boy, Christopher Nolan, fucking shot them all in the foot. And like, which is it's like a Greek tragedy, that man, with like, I wanted to save cinema, but I used cinema to destroy cinema.
Oh my god. Or is anyone else just mildly concerned about all of the content that we are producing and how none of it's going to reflect living in a pandemic?
Yeah, I'm more interested. Like, that's the thing, is a lot of this stuff that's come out during the pandemic was, of course, made before. Right. And so during pandemic times, there's been a lot of, adjustment to try to make stuff, and now there's, obviously with 16 billion shows ordered, there's this huge demand to make stuff now. I'm really curious, like, what stuff is going to be made to reflect on the pandemic, which I think you're still probably at least a full year out from that, because we're not talking about proper vaccination rates happening until at least June, which is looking even further out because, hey, the Trump administration fucked up. Woo! It's not even a story anymore. It's just like, yes, we know. We're gonna leave it to the states to decide. Maybe cohesive vision is what's needed. No, states. Anyway. So, rollout of vaccination was, at best estimates, June, and now is probably more like fucking October. So that's fun. But you're probably at least a year out from stuff that's actively reflecting on the pandemic and thinking about the actual impact of it. Because right now everyone's just trying to get through it as opposed to think about it. Right now, art is probably leaning really heavily on the escapism side of things. And honestly, I think that might just be for the best.
It's also interesting because you're right, it definitely is leading more into the escapism, but it's interesting too when you think about not only the consuming side, but the production side, where like Alfie, you were mentioning how the VFX artists kind of need work and the Snyder Cut is one way to do it. But also when you think about people whose entire livelihoods is making movies or writing comic books and being stuck inside and having to do all of these things, and then being put in a social condition where they can't do anything or make any money. The Cy Sperm Hellblazer run that was critically acclaimed and became like the fan voted best book of the year got canceled in fucking August because of the pandemic. Because there was just no reasonable way to keep publishing that book, because it didn't have the largest audience, and it was too expensive to keep printing that specific comic when you have all the other stuff in the line, and you were in the middle of a global pandemic where you just didn't have the luxury of shipping it to stores. And how comic book stores now aren't really going to let you flip through books while you're in the store because of just safety concerns, which causes a lot of other things to get more and more streamlined. Like DC and Marvel cut their entire lines by a sizable number of books just because they couldn't like afford to produce them. But then there are all these writers on the back end that are like spending all of their days trying to like come up with scripts. Tom King has said he's basically got like 3 or 4 books that are done and in the can that we will probably not see for years, just because of the way everything is kind of been spaced out at this point. But then you look at like movies and productions and stuff, and like how entire filming crews got shut down and entire release schedules got shifted. And like now you have things like the Batman has a different actor with COVID like every fucking week at this point, and they just keep filming the damn movie.
Yeah.
One thing I want to bring up that you mentioned, Steve, because I think I'd be remiss on Geeky Gentlemen to not talk about DC Comics, is like 2020 has changed DC Comics forever. And I don't even mean like, because I know you two aren't like that's up to date with like current and stuff as much as fucking big old geek for fun over here, but just in terms of like that publishing line and like management, because like Dan DiDio left in 2020 and all of that thing happened, but like, and like the whole 5G thing that got talked about has like been reworked and like remangled into what future state's going to be. But in terms of like how they do comics and how the line has shifted, is Marvel was very much just, we just need to cut down on books a little bit and just reshape the thing. But they're not changing how they do Marvel comics. DC, however, is a little bit of, they're not in dire straits, but Marvel has just been outdoing them in sales for a good few years at this point. And I think in response to that, and with the pandemic, it was kind of a bit of an ultimatum where we have to change things now, and otherwise we're going to die. And the first thing that they changed with that was the whole, it was A&T, right? They changed they're the ones who got out.
AT&T.
Yeah, the DC did the previously fucking apparently, because there's such like a thing about that unspeakable thing of moving away from that and shifting the thing, and that they had that whole thing where like fucking Marvel was releasing covers like be part of the proper day release squad, and it's like it was like really kind of like, and like comic book store people, owners were like fucking screaming off the top of their heads. It's like, you've ruined us, you've killed us, DC. Because DC wanted to, again, it's part of like a larger thing where, and especially if you look at like how they're doing like New Frontier, DC is kind of moving towards Shonen Jump. DC is consolidating around their big names like Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, and then fitting in other books inside those books in larger anthology formats, which is what happens with like Shonen Jump or Adult Jump, or like, again, like the different various things of like you see a manga release. And that's kind of fucking weird, and it's entirely due to COVID giving DC, which was already kind of like the flagging company compared to Marvel and the comics things, giving them, I guess, just like the sink or swim attitude. All right, let's try it. Let's do something different. And it's going to take a couple months because they're easing into it. It wasn't like an instant thing. But by the end of 2021, DC Comics will look completely different. And this era we're in of DC now, of like DC having all these different books that kind of started with the New 52, is over. Like that's gone now.
Well, and the other thing about that's really interesting and really terrifying is how comic book stores have to operate with ordering stock for comics, and how DC and Marvel have moved away from Diamond which was a huge thing in the middle of this pandemic to have the big two step away from Diamond, and DC going through multiple fiascos of figuring out how they were going to distribute their comics. And like my local comic book store talks about all the time, how like it's impossible to get DC orders on time just because of how much their shipping fucked up. But it's interesting because the way comic book stores work in general is that you have a very limited window of time to order your books based on what's solicited. And you have to be really good at guessing. So you have the books that are on pull lists, so you order a certain amount for those, and then you order extra copies to put out on your shelves. And you have to just be really smart about, okay, do I want to underbuy on this and overbuy on this? And the best way to run a comic book store in general is you just buy a bunch of the big titles and you underbuy all the rest of them. And as long as you can afford to sell your stock of the big titles like Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, that kind of stuff, then being out of stock really quickly on stuff like Hellblazer doesn't matter. And you'll just barely stay afloat. And the way DC is working now, like you said, to have this Shonen Jump style model, it's almost more beneficial for the comic book store owners because the idea is just going to be you'll have a much more limited inventory you need to keep, and you can just push all of this content out. But the problem is, instead of having an entire line of books for a variety of audiences and a variety of writers and stuff, you're just kind of creating the same sort of Netflix content problem of we're just streamlining everything so we can get books out as quickly as possible and we can move through these things as quickly as possible. And it doesn't even necessarily matter how much the individual writer or audience or anything like that is trying to interact with the content. Even like the Hellblazer run, like that wasn't just Hellblazer, that wasn't just Black Label or Vertigo Hellblazer, that was part of Sandman universe, and that was part of The Dreaming and Sandman and Hellblazer and Books of Magic and all of this stuff, and that whole line gets truncated into one thing now. And that sort of like monolithic approach to publishing comics is just, it's not good, and it is not the way of the future.
I don't know. I'll give it a little more benefit than that, I think. I think that's a pretty good model, in all honesty. I have more faith in that model than the single issue model.
The problem with that model is that you are literally cutting the amount of books writers can write, and you're cutting the amount of content that they're allowed to produce. Like stuff like Cy Sperman's Hellblazer gets canceled because you can't jam it into an anthology series in Future State.
I will argue the opposite for you, Steve. Given what tends to actually happen in comics, is it actually means writers don't have to be forced to write books that they don't want to. Because what happens normally in the single issue thing, just because everyone's kind of spread out and stuff, is if a character is just expected to have a book certain characters need to have a certain thing, like the Harley Quinn solo book or something like that, right? Like writers will get put on that because that needs to be a thing that exists solely because of that, and like people get things. Characters aren't allowed to rest. The reason why the Teen Titans book has been in shambles for so fucking long is because the writers who get put on it don't want to write the Teen Titans, but there is expected to be a Teen Titans book, so people will always be put on that. In this model, if anyone wants to write that story, that character just isn't used until someone does. So I actually argue it is more beneficial for creativity because there is less of a mandate.
I don't know how you could make that argument, because the idea would be DC creates the mandates of the kinds of title characters they want to use and the anthologies they want to put together, and you're going to write and release these books no matter what, and then anything else that gets tacked onto them depends on what the publisher wants to publish and what writers are available to write those things, not necessarily what people are inclined to write. Like, the idea is, like, whether or not someone wants to write a story about Lucius Fox's fourth or fifth child doesn't matter. What matters is DC is pushing this Future State line with these specific Bat characters. Now it's going to happen. It's like you're going to gravitate around the popular characters that have to have titles no matter what, and you're going to have the same problem. And so if your writer doesn't want to write the title, then fuck that writer. We'll get someone else who's going to go ahead and agree to write this writer. Part of the problem you're going to create with this too is the kind of writer pools DC has versus Marvel is going to shift, because Marvel hires a lot of young writers. They pay less. They get all the people that are young talent pools that haven't made a name for themselves, and they stick around for Marvel for a number of years. And then DC steals from Marvel and gives them bigger titles and more money based on the reputation they build up. So like you get people like Tom Taylor, who gets his start at Marvel and then jump ships over to DC, or Scott Snyder, who starts over in Marvel and then jump ships over to DC. With the model they're running now with the anthologies, they need to keep an active pool of young writers, kind of like Marvel does. And you're going to basically say, if you don't stay in line with this anthology model, and you don't stay in line with this sort of monolithic vision of how we're going to effectively publish a bunch of comics all the time, then we'll just hire someone else.
See, I don't know. I think is it fair to say that there's a possibility that you're doomsdaying this, your old man doomsdaying this? Because I think that the single issue
I'm just kind of going
model...
based off of like historically when they've done this before and what the writers have been saying in interviews about this kind of stuff.
Maybe, I don't know. I think that I have more faith in this as at least partially what the future of comics is going to look like than I do in the single issue continuing. Singles have been dying for the longest time. There's really just stupid shit with singles, especially the fact, like, we've talked about this a million times, people are writing for the trade. God, I hate it. They're writing for the trade, not for the single, but the trade sales don't count to whether or not the single gets to continue. So a good example of this is Unstoppable Wasp. Unstoppable Wasp had absolutely amazing trade sales. Its single issue sales were garbage, so the book got canceled. And that's dumb. But if Unstoppable Wasp was able to be running in an anthology book and then had great trade sales on top of that, the anthology sales could have carried it through to be able to continue.
But
that's the thing that I think you're going to see. Is I think you're going to see more books that have more of those darling books that really surprise people. I would think you're also going to see more people picking up and getting into characters that they otherwise wouldn't, because now it's not going to be as isolated. Maybe someone will actually like Lucius Fox's 17th Child because they're appearing in this anthology thing. Maybe people will dip their toes in more because they've already bought it. They bought it because they're going to buy the Batman thing regardless. But now they've got all these other pages. You might as well give it a shot.
But my worry again with that is DC has no incentive to try creative, interesting things in their anthology, because if they're streamlining their line, then the characters that have to appear regularly are going to be the ones that get the opening spots for most of this stuff. So you don't only have Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Justice League, but you have all of the little side characters for those main lines that have to have books no matter what. So I don't know where the incentive for DC is to plug inside the back end of the Bat anthology like a Cassie Kane story. Like, I don't see that happening. And so you're going to try and, again, streamline the content as much as possible and write the things that are going to sell, and the pages will get filled up with the things that were going to get published no matter what, and the chances of writing unique, different things that would otherwise get single issues would not get short stories in the anthologies. Obviously, single issues are dying. Like, I don't think single issues are the future. I don't even think comic book stores are the way of the future. Those are all going to have to go eventually. And sadly, a lot of them went out of business during the pandemic. But the problem is just, if your approach is to cut everything down to the guts and publish just that, then I don't see you trying to branch out and doing other unique things, because you're essentially saying that branching out and doing unique things didn't work. So now we're just going to tailor everything to fit neatly together.
See, I disagree with that.
Yeah, I would agree with you there, Steve. Like, because I think you are, like, following the historical precedent. I think your argument is sound. I think you're pulling from examples of where this has happened before and what other writers have said. My big again, this could all blow up in my face, but again, the benefit of the doubt I'm doing is, like, I change in what is shepherding this, right? You look at the New 52. What was the motivation behind the New 52? to revamp things and make everything hipper and younger and try and get to a new demographic audience and stuff. And New 52 did do good stuff, and the New 52 did have some really great books in it. But all the creators at the time were like, yeah, this kind of sprung this on us, and we didn't know what to do, and we had to kind of scramble, and then they had like really weird editorial mandates, and like none of these people could keep books. The conversation around this, like Future State / New Frontier, is we had these ideas all the time, and once Dan DiDio got kicked out, we started listening to different people, and now one of the major voices behind all of this is apparently fucking Grant Morrison, of all people, and I'm just like, okay, so that's at least a lot more fucking promising in terms of creatives who have been building towards this for a while now. Because again, this isn't like the Ultimate Universe or New 52 where we're starting with like a reboot of like continuity with like a new Superman, a new Batman, like origin stories. Then I believe you. It was like, it's trying to go back to the pure basics. They're fucking like leading with, oh yeah, John Kent's gonna be Superman, and then this new fucking chick's gonna be Wonder Woman, and then Kara's gonna be Superwoman, and she's gonna be fucking leading the moon with refugees, and then Tim Drake's gonna be Robin, but in his backups is gonna be Stephanie Brown, Cassandra Cain doing Batgirls. And it's like, okay, yeah, all of this doesn't sound like Mandate. All of this does sound like new ideas we weren't getting before. So I actually do want to give the benefit of the doubt that this is effectively DC corporate manager being like, all right, fuck it, we tried, you fuckers try and do it. See, and this is the creators being like, yes, thank you, you should have said this from the fucking beginning. Like, this feels definitely that these aren't decisions that were made in boardrooms, because no fucking boardroom exec's like, okay, let's make Clark Kent wear a really kinky Michael Janine costume where he's gonna be just in his wrist cuffs and S-shield on Warworld fighting half naked. That is not a conversation that happens as like appealing to the widest audience. It does, but it's not what they think does.
No, I mean, I want to agree with you. My worry is just I don't know how much faith I have in DC to make this work, especially because Future State's a 2-month thing, and then we get back to the mainline universe post-Future State, and we'll see whether or not they actually stick to this, or if it just changes up all over again.
I mean, it's DC. It's going to be a mixed bag, right? Like, it's not going to be perfect, and it's not going to be all awful. Like, there's going to be something in it that you're going to be like, okay, yeah, this is really fucking good. Like, I mean, I joked about that for the longest time. Like, everyone was complaining about New 52, and meanwhile, I was the only one reading the good books. So, I don't know. I don't want to give the impression that it's going to be some kind of perfect thing, but at the same time, I have more faith in this model than I do in the single issue, which seems like every reboot has been attempting to hold on to like crazy. So that's been something on mind. Anyway, I don't know. 2020 has been a weird year that's left a lot of things in different ways than they stood. Again, movie theaters are probably all gonna die. Like, you're gonna probably have like I'm really disappointed because we're gonna have, there's gonna be the theater snobs that like really want to maintain that theatrical experience, and so movie theaters are gonna open back up after the pandemic. But you're not gonna be able to go watch fucking superhero movies on them. It's gonna be all fucking like art house bullshit indie films that are so far up their own ass that they don't even like this film is all just black. We never took the lens caps off the camera because really when you're sitting in the theater, it's the darkness that you're experiencing. Like, I'm gonna every film is gonna be so far up its own ass. I'm not gonna care to go to a theater for a long ass time.
Right, Mr. Nolan. I love that. It's just the impression was very much just like, well, you've got to come see it anyway, despite the pandemic, because it was meant to be seen in theaters and experienced in IMAX on the biggest screen. But sir, you didn't take the lens cap off. It's like, yes, but it has to be in IMAX. So it's the perfect. It's the most initiative way in the cinema industry.
Yeah, no, for sure. So I don't know. It's just like that. That's gonna be a problem for a while. Like, I was watching.
I definitely don't mind seeing like most of the popcorny films get HBO Max releases instantly. Like,
I mean, that's fine. It's
just... like I don't need to see fucking Justice League or Wonder Woman in a movie theater. I'm fine to watch that on TV. Like, it's not like those movies are made with that sort of like big movie theater experience. They're made for that sort of like get together with a bunch of your friends and party movie kind of experience.
Nah, see, I disagree. Like, I love watching the superhero movies and stuff in theaters because, like, all the jokes hit so much harder in a theater than it does in a more intimate setting. Every joke is funnier. Every big hype moment is hyper. You get like I love the theater experience for the social dynamic of it.
I mean, I do too. I just don't get that out of superhero movies very often, I don't think.
Oh, no, man, I get great audience reactions. I'm sorry you don't, because it's legit made bad superhero movies much better. To just be able to think back on like that really cool audience moment that happened. I don't know. 2020 really is like all those old video games and movies and stuff. It's like the year is 2020. Like it's 2020 is the first year that like really felt like that. Like any other movie is like the year is 2010, and I think back to 2010, I'm like, nah, it was nothing like that. 2020 is the first time I'm like, you know, it's kind of like all those movies that say that it's the year 2020 and everything's gone to hell. So that's, I don't know, that's kind of where I'm left with. There's a lot of bad that happened in 2020. I personally had a lot of good, but that's, I guess, just fortune. I don't know. I'm fortunate for that. I'm glad for that, but I don't blame other people for wanting to wipe 2020 off the map.
You should blame me.
Yeah, it's all your fault.
You should blame Buzzkill for fun. That is my imperative. 2020 could fucking suck my cock, man. Fuck this year.
Fair enough.
Not a good year.
All right. Well, I think that's going to wrap it up for 2020. Do you want to give a rating to 2020?
5 out of 5. A little something for everyone.
Yeah.
Masterpiece.
Oh, man. All right. So, next time, before the episode, Steve and I did the honor system of rock, paper, scissors to decide who was going to pick the review topic, because we both had things. And so I won. I won with a decisive rock over scissors victory. Really the best kind of rock, paper, scissors victory. No one really wants to win with paper. And so I'm picking this it's kind of weird little like old sci-fi film that I think flies under a lot of people's radar. Is pretty influential, but in ways that you wouldn't realize. Came out in 74, 75 by kind of an art house director at the time. Not a lot of people had heard of him. And it's got a kind of like a hokey name, but the film's called Star Wars.
No.
Have you never reviewed Star Wars on the channel?
We've never reviewed Star Wars on the channel. It's one of those things that just, why would you?
Don't do it. Change your mind, Ian. It's not too late.
What's wrong? We can talk about Star Wars. I want to fucking talk about Star Wars.
I look to the camera as the Imperial March plays.
Dang.
What do you think, we're gonna shit on Star Wars for an hour?
Nothing in
I'm
this
not.
movie makes any sense. Mark Hamill's a total Mary Sue. Those lightsaber effects are terrible. What is this movie?
like seriously, no. Like, I'm not gonna do just fucking shit on Star Wars for an hour. I'm not a Star Wars fan. I'm not gonna dunk on Star Wars for an hour.
Oh, I'm sure.
No, I fucking love Star Wars. I want to talk about what I love about Star Wars. I've been watching Rebels, and it's been making me really want to go back and rewatch the series. And well, I finished Rebels, and I'm gonna probably. I really expected Rebels to lead into Rogue One more than it did with that final season. So I was
It
gonna
leads
watch
into
Rogue One.
fucking Return of the Jedi of all things.
I know, that was surprising. So if anything, I'm probably just gonna skip Rogue One and go straight to A New Hope, and yeah, we're just gonna fucking review the first Star Wars movie. Yeah, I honestly expected some hype. I'm a little disappointed in you, Alfie. You think
I am
so little
hyped.
of me.
I am hyped, but I'm also just like fucking I even know what I feel like right now. I'm in a weird mood.
Okay.
Weirdness.
All right. Well, please join us for that next week, everyone. Until then, I'm the philosopher.
I am a weirder for fun, apparently.
And I am a random Yu-Gi-Oh card of the week.
So, like, you can't even keep up with doing it. Now you're just randomly saying Yu-Gi-Oh card. You're not even, like, actually
Alright,
picking from the thing.
fucking Steve, I attack you directly. What have you got in your back row? Go.
I have got Mirror Force.
Ah, you son of a fuck!
Mirror Force is the original anxiety.
And we are your Geeky Gentlemen, and we will be discussing things.